All right. Well, thank you guys all for being here. It's really wonderful you're making time to be a part of this. And basically the thought is I know that many of you are at least thinking about applying for a PhD either this year or at some point in future years. And we, Tracy, Becky, and I thought it'd be nice to, host a kind of series of workshops. And, based on the interest and attendance today, it seems like, there'd probably be enough interest to do some more after this one, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. That hopefully we'll kind of clear up some of. Looks like Becky's here too, and Blake, wonderful, and Nicole is here now. Great. Okay, wonderful. Hopefully clear up kind of some of how the process works, and hopefully give you guys some real kind of nuts and bolts advice as well as resources for how to put together a really competitive PhD application process, so that if you ultimately decide that that's something that you want to do, that you'll have a leg up. And one of the things that we see sitting on admissions committees is that some students have very clear understanding of how the whole process works and what are all the pieces and how to craft those pieces. And then oftentimes other students, for one reason or another, don't understand kind of all of the pieces, and then it ends up being a kind of pitfall in their application package. And so I think if we're at all successful, we can kind of lay out what is involved, and in making a really successful argument for yourself to get into the PhD program or programs of your choice. So basically, this idea, it is to have today be a kind of starter. And in addition to Becky and Tracy that will help me facilitate, and I'll talk about the structure here in just a second. At 2 o'clock, Maya Munsterman and Kyle Roy will join us. And Maya and Kyle, many of you may know, are recent TCBES graduates that have been successful in terms of getting into PhD programs. And they're going to join us and talk a little bit about kind of particular parts of the process. And in particular, what we want to focus on today, in addition to the kind of overview, is what are the first steps. And I'll talk a bit about that. But then, probably more importantly, Maya and Kyle will talk a little more in depth, a little bit about their story, and share some materials for how they've started those first steps to get things going with potential advisors. And then, what we want to do is really just field your questions, and probably many of your questions won't be covered today. I would imagine that many of them will be covered in future workshops. And at the end of today, depending on how much time we have, we'll try and cover the questions, certainly the ones that pertain to what we were hoping to cover today that are still unresolved. Some questions we may punt to a future workshop. For example, things about getting letters of recommendation or writing your research statement. We're not going to cover those things today. So if you have questions about those things, great, get them out there, and then we're going to make sure to cover them in detail and in depth in these future workshops. If you guys are interested, after today, you may decide, I've had enough, we don't need to do this again. But anyhow, if it sounds good to you, what I'd like to do is just share my screen for a minute and share some slides that Tracy, Becky, and I put together. And I think it's this one right here. It'll kind of be a path for us to walk through today. Today's session won't be all slides and lecture kind of based. It'll be a few different things, but there are definitely some slides that are going to kind of guide us. Can everybody, though, before I launch into it, see the slides that I'm showing? And if I go into presenter mode, you now see it's full screen that says PhD application workshop. Okay, great. So as I mentioned, Becky, Tracy, and I are facilitating. Maya and Kyle are going to join us as expert panelists about 2 o'clock. And the session goals for today are pretty straightforward. Just 4 things. We first of all want to talk, and Tracy and Becky are going to do this, talk a bit about what a PhD entails. What are you signing up for if you decide that you want to sign up for this? And I think most of you know, but we'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And then what does a PhD allow in your careers, and what are different avenues in terms of where you can take your career if you do decide to do a PhD. And then second goal, overall goal is just, as I mentioned before, to understand the overall process, the kind of, pulled back view. What are the main pieces and what's the timeline? And the timeline is actually now, right? You really want to start as soon as possible. And we'll get to that when I get to the timeline, but we'll walk through and kind of detail the timeline. And it, unfortunately, it's a long and slow process. And here's Terry, wonderful. Hopefully the timeline part will kind of clear up when major pieces are good to get done and when major things absolutely have to be in, et cetera. And then, as I mentioned, the third goal here is just to be aware of what are the first steps to get started. And those are the things that if you're thinking about applying this year, you want to start to work on right away. And then, as I mentioned, if there's time at the end, answer any questions that remain that haven't been answered as we go through these other steps of the session. So, as you guys probably know, there's lots of different ways to get to graduate school, and there's no right way, there's no wrong way. Many people will go right from an undergraduate degree straight into a PhD program and skip a master's. All of you, like myself, are going from a master's to a PhD. I'll just say quickly that I am really glad that I did that. My master's really helped in terms of my comfort level in my PhD. And I think if you do decide to do a PhD, you'll find hopefully the same thing. A lot of people will go into a PhD after working in a lab position as a lab technician or a field technician. Some people will come from a bachelor's outside of biology and they'll do the kind of post-bac, they'll get the course requirements that they need for any particular PhD program, and they'll come from a entirely other discipline. And other people will, work in a non-lab position. So, for example, teaching, middle school or high school, elementary school, et cetera, working, for a nonprofit, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots and lots of different ways. They all, kind of can set you up well to enter in a PhD program. So let's see. Oops. In terms of introductions, I think everybody probably knows each other, but do you guys mind if we could just go quickly through and say, hi, this is who I am, and maybe just a little about what kind of PhD you're thinking about. For example, I want to do a PhD in, marine biology, or I want to do a PhD in entomology, or any, kind of thoughts. Would people be open to that if we just did that quickly? Okay, Rose, since you're the first tile that I see, do you mind starting?
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everyone. My name's Rose, and I am currently, I'm about to start my second year in TCBES. And right now I'm working with seaweeds, and that's essentially my goal, is to do a PhD working with analyzing more so glyphosate implications for seaweeds. It's turning out to be a big project, so I hope I can make that a PhD. And yeah.
Wonderful, Rose. Yeah, I mean, that's oftentimes what happens, right? Is people's masters turn out to be something that they just really want to keep going, and it's obviously you can't do it all in a master. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Dawn, would you mind going next, since you're the next up on my screen? I know everyone has it organized differently.
Oh yeah, hi, I'm Dawn. I currently should be finishing my master's this semester, and I've been working on a meta-analysis of different trophic strategies in corals. And I don't know how certain I am about a PhD, but I'm curious. Mm-hmm. And if I were to do a PhD, I think I'd like to turn my master's into that, so right now it's a meta-analysis, maybe an actual experimental approach to deciding all of those different strategies.
Yeah,
So
wonderful. I mean, it sounds to me like a perfect way to set up a PhD is to do a meta-analysis and really kind of understand the big picture and then identify where the important gaps are to do, like you're saying, any experimental or other type of work moving forward. That sounds great. Well, thank you, Don. Trevor, do you mind going next?
Yeah, no problem. I'm Trevor, I guess third year student in the TCBES program, doing my master's on modern extinction risk among marine fishes. And for PhD, I'm interested in continuing to focus on like modern extinction and what's pushing species towards extinction.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very excited about your project, of course, but it's great that after spending the last few years thinking about this deeply and working on this, that you want to continue. And I really look forward to seeing how things develop as you continue. So thank you, Trevor, very much. Nicola, would you mind going next? I think you're on.
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Nicola. I'm currently doing my master's on a ciguatera project where I'm looking at how climate change and chloral bleaching affects the prevalence of ciguatera in Roy's and Kole in the Hawaiian Reefs along the west coast of this island. I would like to continue my PhD in marine science. Continuing in the area of ciguatoxins might be an interest of mine, but I'm still not 100% sure in which way I kind of want to go. I just, in the long run, would love to be a professor and have a lab and be able to have undergrads working with me and doing more research. So that's what my end goal would like to be. So kind of just depends on how I get there. So.
Yeah, wonderful, Nicola. Well, I too am very excited about your project, and it's great that you're thinking about it, but also thinking about other possibilities, kind of within marine biology, marine ecology, and it's also great that you really know what your vision is for where you want your career to go ultimately, and I think that can be really helpful. Nicola, thank you. Dominique, would you mind going next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Sarders. I am a biological science tech with USDA. I graduated from TCBES a couple years ago, or last year, sorry. All this time has kind of blended together. But I'm thinking about a PhD to become more competitive for a scientist role with USDA. Not technically a researcher, but a position where I lead research, but I don't have to hire techs or supervise them or write grants.
Great. Well, that, Dominique, is a great segue to where we'll be in just a second. That Tracy will talk about kind of what's possible with a PhD, and it's great that you're already thinking, kind of what's your sweet spot, right? And what sets you up to be in that sweet spot. So, Dominique, thank you very much. Let's see. I actually just changed my order here on the screen, but Blake, would you mind going next?
I don't mind. Am I coming out? Is my voice, can anyone hear me?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. My name is Blake and I'm currently a third year student in the program. I'm currently dealing with research with Queensland longhorn beetles, and my background major is in entomology. So I've always been interested with insects. So the idea is to, at some point, whether it's this semester or going into the next, apply to programs, PhD programs in entomology, where I can continue helping with invasive species management.
Wonderful, Blake. Well, as you know, it's one of the most pressing and important ecological issues we have. So kudos to you, and I really look forward to following your research as you move forward with it. So please do keep me posted. But that sounds wonderful. And Blake, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
You bet. And then Terry, would you mind introducing yourself and talking a little bit about what you might be thinking about?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
It's great.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So hi, I'm Terry. former TCBS student, left the program, currently working, currently in a master's program at Cornell University, I am right now creating transgenic strains of microalgae for a USDA project to overproduce phytase to replace proteins for animal feed, and with carotenoid OR gene expression. So it's kind of what my research is right now. I'm looking to be finished with my program here by December. Actually, I'm here in Hawaii right now, back home, getting my family set up after living in New York for a year. I'm heading back to New York tomorrow. I'm going to be writing my thesis in absentia because I'm pretty much done with my research. Focused on looking at a PhD if it's something within the field. I've been in algae production since about 2010. So built labs in different states and worked for different companies here on island, off island. So microalgae is kind of my thing. And some jobs I've looked at would be more competitive if I had a PhD. Others take the experience. So I'm just kind of exploring at where I am right now.
Well, Terry, thank you. Wonderful to meet you. And it sounds like incredibly important work that you're doing now. And it seems like you have a really good vision for where you want to go. And welcome back to Hawaii, and good luck with going back to New York tomorrow. It sounds very busy. So thank you for being here with all what's going on in your life. But wonderful. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. What I'd like to do now is, if I could, turn it over to Becky. Becky, would you be open to talking a little bit about kind of what is a PhD and what it entails?
Yes, definitely. Okay, so a PhD is a doctor of philosophy, and so it has ancient roots in the philosophical sciences. But as my PhD advisor, Jack Putz, used to say to me, like, you have to have a philosophical basis for a PhD. A PhD is an intensive research project, and it has to have a strong conceptual basis where you're sort of pushing the envelopes and moving the field. A PhD is not just, simple research. It needs to be something that's very meaty, that has a strong conceptual basis to it. Okay. And that's where the philosophical part. So it's a research degree, and you will mainly be doing research. It's an intensive research experience. So it's like a master's, but a lot more. So, like a master's on some steroids sort of thing. In a master's degree, you're working really hard and you're focusing, and you're probably going to come out with one scientific publication. And a PhD, you would have 3 or 4 publications. So you have different chapters, right? And so it would be the study that you're doing times 2 or 3 more studies would be what encompasses a PhD. So it's much more comprehensive. It's like kind of like a puzzle, or those Russian dolls, depending on how your PhD goes, but where you're putting your different pieces together and you're doing a significant study to address each different piece. So I worked, for example, my PhD was looking at root dynamics in Hawaiian forests, and if there were parallel processes going on to leaves. I did one chapter that was, first actually I did one chapter that I started working in Costa Rica on a root project there that became one chapter of my PhD. I then did a study in Hawaii, study that became one study, and then I did a detailed budgeting, productivity study that became another study. So these different pieces all kind of fit together to make this larger whole, and then I had kind of a synthesis part of it. So it's an intensive research experience. You have an advisor that you work relatively closely with. If you're not doing your advisor's research topic, your advisor will be somebody that you, for the most part, will be talking to and checking in with regularly. Like a master's, you have a committee, but in a master's, you typically have 3 people on a committee, in a PhD, you typically have 5, sometimes 4, and one person usually has to be outside of your department or field. So it's a little bit more comprehensive in that way because you're integrating across different fields and you're getting outside expert opinions. You will, in a typical PhD, that involves kind of 4 things: coursework, qualifying exams, doing your research, and then a defense. So coursework could be several years. However, if you do have a master's, like in your case, at a lot of schools, they may waive a lot of the coursework or say that you've already satisfied the requirements for the coursework. It sort of depends on your program in the school. But with a master's, you may have to take fewer courses than somebody that doesn't have a master's and is just starting out at a PhD level. The qualifying exams, depending on the school and the program, they could be oral, written, or both. Mine were both. So there's like an intensive study period where I spent the whole semester reading lots of stuff and studying. And that's really the whole point of those things, is the studying, really more than the exam. But I did have a 3-hour oral exam where I got grilled on lots of questions, and they push you to the edge of your knowledge and they try to see what you don't know. And then I had, 5 different people asking me essay questions. So that took, like 1 day per person. So that was, or at least a full day of writing essay questions. So that's like a week of my time of answering those essay questions, going to the literature. Really, it's really a lot about integration. A PhD is definitely a labor of love because it is more intensive than the master's. You really want to feel like you're motivated by the research, that you're passionate, you want to know the answers, because just like in your master's, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be good times and exciting times, and then there's going to be times when things fail. Your experiment fails, you don't get your permit, there's a global pandemic, whatever it is, nobody gets out unscathed. And so there is going to be those ups and downs. And so, believing and being very excited and passionate about what you're doing really helps to get you through. For me, can you guys see this? This is what we got when we turned in in the old days, we had like a person that checked your margins and everything, and you had to bring them a printed copy. And when you finished that, they gave you this sticker, and I was like, this was like most proud of, like I've kept this the whole time and I have it in my office, because it is just, a lot of peaks and valleys, but when you're done, you feel like you've accomplished something. So that's the basics of what is a PhD program. Like a master's, you have some of the best learning experiences are from the fellow students in your program. It's not just about the faculty. You learn as much from each other. There's lots of peer review. You're just given more responsibility than a master's. You might be doing teaching. You might be mentoring the younger students in the lab, all kinds of different things that are going along with this training. So it's like further training and further mentoring. Did I miss anything there?
I think that was
making me have flashbacks. Right.
I will say that. Oh, go ahead.
Let's say right before it must have been the oral qualifying exam. There was construction on campus and people took stucco paint and threw it all over my car the night before. So I was pretty stressed out in addition to just taking the test.
That's terrible.
I made it through. And I got my car repainted.
Yeah, for me, I think the worst thing for my orals was I had done the writtens first, and so I psyched myself up that like waiting outside the room the time I came in, and they hadn't they hadn't each read my answers for the other people. They wanted to pass them around and read them. So like, oh, we should have told you to come 20 minutes later. We need to read these. And I like just completely like gotten into this zone of like, I can do this. And that just completely like blew my concentration. But I still passed. So there's a lot of things like that happen. It's just part of what it is.
Now, is everybody clear after Becky's explanation that they don't want to do a PhD? I think I'll just second Becky that there, like, just like your master's, there's a lot of highs and lows, right? There are stresses and there are the wonderful moments of elation and joy and discovery, and everybody's experience is obviously different, but I guess just like any life experience, I would expect highs and lows as you go. And we'll have a chance, to get all of your guys' questions here in just a moment. But before we switch gears to Tracy talking a little bit about what it means if you have a PhD and what kind of career options are available to you, I just realized that, Amanda, I missed you. I didn't have us here in the full view, and I didn't see your tile. Would you mind, Amanda, just introducing yourself to the group for anyone who may not know you, and just maybe just briefly explain a little bit about why you might want to do a PhD or kind of what you might want to do a PhD in?
Hey, yeah. So I graduate from the TCBES program this upcoming semester. I am all in on research. I don't like to teach. I don't really like to mentor. I really just want to do research. And my specialty is conservation of endangered bird species. I study disease ecology, microbiomes, and conservation. So I'm thinking I might want to do a PhD in order to get a position where I would have control over every step of the process. So I like designing experiments, I like field work, I like lab work, I like writing, I like all the steps. So I think that getting a PhD would allow me to get a position that I would have a lot of control over all of those steps.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Amanda, again, I apologize that I missed you earlier, but thank you so much. And that's, I think, a really kind of perfect segue to transition from what Becky was just talking about, of what a PhD is, what it entails, to what Tracy's going to talk about. Well, so now you have a PhD, and Amanda, you're clearly thinking about this as others have expressed as well. What does that mean? What does it allow you to do? Tracy, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the first thing I would start off with is that a PhD is not just a degree, it's a lifestyle decision, because you never leave work. Work is always with you. Even if you're not working, it's on your brain, or at least the back of the brain. And the level of responsibility is very different than what you would have as a master's in general. So for the most part, and the positions can vary, but there's some things that are kind of consistent across them. You're the one in charge. So you're the one generating the ideas. You're the one who's seeking out the funds to pursue the project. You're seeking out funds to support either employees or students. So you have that responsibility of trying to ensure you can pay people's salaries. And here at UH Hilo, it's kind of short term because we're talking about a master's program. But for PhD students, advisors are looking to support a student anywhere from like 5 to 6 years, or 4 to 6 years, unless the student gets their own money or has some kind of research position in the department or a teaching position. So I know that we're going to cover the kinds of things for how to pay for a PhD in another workshop. But again, I just want to kind of stress it's a lifestyle decision, because with the masters, oftentimes people are they're the technicians, so they run the projects, but when they go home, they go home. They are not worrying about applying for grants. They're not worried about making sure they have funds to support their employees. So it's a different kind of level of responsibility, but it's also a different kind of freedom where you get to decide the direction that the projects go. And like I said before, you never really get to leave work behind, and it's hard to like clear your plate, which is something that always very frustrates me, because I'd like to cross everything off my list and be like, hey, it's all done, but it's never done because things keep adding to the list. And if you've ever gone through the process of writing a manuscript and submitting it, you understand that it's a long process before it's done, which means it's getting published. So there's lots of different kinds of careers you can do. For me, I wanted to go into academics. I liked what I saw my professors doing as an undergrad. I was one of the people who went directly from undergrad to PhD. I didn't know that a master's was even an option because where I wasn't seeing that. I only saw PhD students. And maybe that was just because of the department I was in. Because I know Cornell has master's students, but at the time I didn't see them. So I went straight through and then straight onto a postdoc. And so by the time I was 30, I was at Hilo. So I started really early. I'm not the youngest one anymore, but I was the youngest for quite a while. But so you can do the, the academic pathway. Typically what happens is you'll finish your PhD. You then go on to usually a postdoc, which is an experience where you can gain more experience that makes you more competitive. You can get more opportunities for grant writing and publishing that makes you more competitive for those academic positions. And sometimes people do 1, 3, it just kind of depends on the field you're in and whether there's openings for you to move into. But it's sort of postdocs are temporary positions. And then you go on to your job. So it could be academics. It could also be going into agencies. The agency that I've seen the most here in Hilo has been the Forest Service. So they're very research oriented. They tend to have technicians who work for them. They do have a few students on projects, but they don't have the teaching responsibility like the faculty at Hilo. They can teach if they want, but they have to get permission. But their focus is primarily on research. Some of them are also outreach specialists. There are also people who then go on to do other advanced degrees. So especially like from our program, you could go into environmental law. So you could have, the science background, and then you build on that with a law background or education. You could go into public health. For me, I always thought I would be much more of like an ecosystem type person, but my work now has this public health aspect to it that I never thought I would be doing. So there's lots of different options. There are people with PhDs who then go on to decide that, maybe that PhD lifestyle isn't what they wanted to do. They might go back into teaching. I had a couple of people when I was in high school that had PhDs that were teaching. There are options for you if consulting is another one. That often pays pretty darn well, better than academics. A federal position pays pretty well. You could also go into state and county agencies as well. And I would probably say, probably in academics, you have the greatest amount of freedom. Then some of the federal agencies do have a lot of freedom, but they have mandates on kinds of projects that they want to do. And probably state and county is pretty, you're a leader, but you're being told to work on specific things that are relevant to the counties or the states. I'm trying to think of other things. People start their own consulting companies too, so you can go work for one of the big consulting agencies, or you can start your own. I know someone who now works for NOAA, but on the side does consulting work for different people who want measurements on the coral reefs or water quality in front of different developments. So they get hired for that kind of stuff as well.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
One major thing that's different between having a master's and a PhD in the job is the level of responsibility that you will have. If you're a master's, you may be like supervising a few people and have a fair amount of responsibility. But if you're a PhD scientist, you're the one that's running the show. Most likely, you're the one that's responsible for getting grants to support your research, which is a huge amount of time and stress to get the funding. When there's problems with personnel or those kinds of things, you're the one that you're it's sort of where the buck stops. If you have a PhD, you're going to have a significant more level of responsibility, which is unique and challenging than if you have a master's versus having a bachelor's degree, where you're mostly doing what other people tell you. With a master's, you have a lot more autonomy. You might be running programs. With the PhD, you've just got another level of responsibility. And so some of it is also being really honest with yourself, like how much responsibility you want and how much you want to hold on to that and take that home with you. Because like Tracy says, it does follow you around.
Yeah, and the other thing now just coming to mind too is the financial side. So you're in charge of managing the finances for the projects. So keeping the budgets, I mean, not only acquiring the funds, but then managing the budgets, making, doing the ordering, making sure there's still money there, looking at people's salaries. And just to circle back on Becky, I'd probably say the hardest part is the personnel, especially when you have great personnel, it's wonderful. But when things go wrong, it can be really trying. And I can tell you that I've lost sleep over students and employees, and it can be quite trying because you're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do for individuals or for the group. So it can be quite trying at times. And there isn't a lot of, I don't know, there's not a lot of training. So you kind of learn by experience.
But at the same time, it's fun because you're like setting the agenda and getting to do what you want to do. Yeah, Nicola.
Sorry, I was just wondering, so like you guys were talking about postdoc and stuff like that. And what's the typical length that people postdoc for, or do you have to? And where does that kind of funding come from? Is that something you're coming with, or is it somebody that you're working under that comes with? Or that whole kind of aspect of the post PhD kind of thing is a bit of elusive to me.
And I think you hit on everything that is true.
Yes to everything you said.
Yeah, so PhDs, so you don't have to do a postdoc, but most people do because most people are not quite competitive enough right out of the PhD to move on to permanent positions. That tends to be the hot shots who are able to, who got a lot of publications out, who had grant writing experience, that are identified as stars in their field, up and coming stars in their field. They're the ones most likely to be able to skip a postdoc. Postdocs can be anywhere from a year to however long it takes you to secure a permanent position. And people move from postdoc to postdoc. Where that money comes from, you could apply for fellowships, so then you're funding your own. You'll most likely be able to go where you want. That's the same thing with a PhD. It could be working under a project that's funded. So that was my example. My postdoc advisor had secured a grant. I came in to run the project. And people know that when they hire postdocs, they could leave at any time, because as soon as you're offered a good permanent position, that fits well with what you want to do, you leave. So,
yeah, that was a question too. I wasn't sure like if you're bound by a contract with these people, or like if you have to do a set amount of time with them, or
that might be part of the negotiations, and that might vary from individual. Mine was 2 years, but I'm guessing I probably could have left earlier, but coming into like a year and a half, I started looking for positions. Like every Friday I would just start, scouring and sending stuff out. That's what I would do on Friday afternoons. And they know that you're not there forever. Although some people do stay there forever, but most don't.
Don, you had a question?
Yeah, it's something I've been seeing because I follow a bunch of people on Twitter, science Twitter, and talking about PhDs and postdocs and everything. And I see this, not argument, but is a postdoc a job or is postdoc training? Like, do you have that mentorship, or are you just hired to go in? Like, what is, you just said if you might not be competitive enough, so you go into a postdoc, but what is that dynamic there?
Sorry, Tracy, you want to take that?
I was going to say it's supposed to be training. And when I was a postdoc, NSF didn't have this, but now they do, where if you want a postdoc on your project, you have to have a postdoc mentoring plan that is submitted with your grant. Talking about the different kinds of training opportunities that you will provide that individual who's working with you. So I came through before those things were established. So like all the kinds of training that people do now with students and postdocs, I came before that, so I was really kind of making things up as I went along. I didn't get a lot of advice from advisors. I had a CV and a cover letter from a student who was a little bit ahead of me that I was using as a model. No one prepped me on what the interviews were going to be like. So, sometimes I'm quite amazed that I got a job. But
there are some fields like molecular biology that are, have oodles of postdocs, and those can be more job-like and less training. That's just the way those labs are run. It's a little bit more of a factory, but in the environmental sciences, it really is supposed to be a mentored experience.
And I'll just add, and then we should probably move on to the next topic here, but I'll just add to that, Nicola and Don, that this postdoc is most important if you're going forward in academia. Lots and lots, like as Tracy was saying, there's lots and lots of jobs where you finish your PhD and you just go straight into those. And community college teaching at a small liberal arts college, working for a nonprofit, working for the state or the county, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't need a postdoc at all. The postdoc is in some cases necessary for federal jobs like with the USGS or the Forest Service at kind of high levels, if you want to come in at a high level with lots of salary and lots of responsibility. But it's almost always necessary if now, as opposed to a generation ago, if you want a faculty job at a research-oriented university. So that's where you're going. You're thinking, yeah, I want to do a postdoc anywhere from 1 to 5 years or a couple of postdocs. But if you're thinking about these other routes, the postdoc isn't a necessary component. It's not necessarily going to hurt you, and it might even help you, but you don't have to do a postdoc to go in all these other directions. You just really have to do a postdoc to get an academic position at a university that has a strong research focus. Tracy, would you agree with that?
Definitely. And the other component too is that there are limited openings in academics. So doing the postdoc kind of buys the time until one's open up that you can apply for. It gives you more experience, more training, makes you more competitive, but there might not be the opportunities that you're looking for right at the time when you finish. And so you're able to continue your training. I tend to think of a postdoc like a super PhD student, but they often help buy time until the right position opens up for you to apply.
Yeah, I like to think of it as finishing school for researchers. So if you want to be a researcher, you want to be a faculty member, you do this kind of finishing school. That's the way I think of it. It's an overly simplistic way, but it's certainly, it's not all avenues by any means. Having said that, Becky, go ahead, and we should probably go into the
we should just go, let's go on to the breakout room.
So what we've done here in terms of the outline that I haven't done a good job of tracking here is the first 3 things, right? Introduced ourselves, what we're thinking about, what is a PhD that Becky talked about, what are some career possibilities that Tracy led and we've all talked about. You guys had great questions. Now what we want to do is go into breakout rooms. We'll go into 3 Becky will be in one, Tracy will be in another, and I'll be in another. And we just want to take your questions, not answer your questions, just take them. And then, time provided at the end, we'll try and address any that haven't been addressed. But they'll also, probably many of them will be perfect fodder for us to develop future workshops if you guys decide that you want them, so that we can make sure that we really hit them as we move forward. So what I want to do is put us into just kind of randomly put us into 3 breakout rooms here. I'm going to stop share, and let's just spend, just for the sake of time, 5 minutes, because we want to come back together. We're going to have Maya and Kyle join us at 2 o'clock on the hour here, and I wanted to say a few things before they speak. So I'm going to assign automatically into 3 rooms, or I guess, yeah, so whoops, then we need to just move to make sure that we have, but I guess I just need to put myself in a room. So let's see. I don't see myself.
I think you just pop into a room after you sign up the room.
Okay, that sounds great. So Amanda, Blake, and Dawn, you guys are going to be in a room, and I'm going to join you after and take your questions. And Nicola, Rose, and Tracy, you guys will be together, and Becky and Trevor, you guys will be together. You'll be a small room, but we'll just take 5 minutes. I'll send you the little thing with the 60 seconds. We'll come back together. And we'll come back to those questions, answering those questions, hopefully as we go, but then some at the end, and like I say, moving forward. Okay, so I'll see everybody in 5 minutes. Otherwise, the group I'll see right now. Okay. Okay, now how do I put myself in this room?
Yeah. What's up, Blake?
Hi.
Hi, you guys. Are you bored stiff?
No.
No.
Okay. I feel like we're talking too much, but I think we're going to get into the more of the nuts and bolts, now that we've kind of covered these first pieces. But to do that and to make sure that we're answering your questions, why don't we just go in order that I have you here, which is Amanda, Dawn, and then Blake. Do you guys want to just tell me your questions? And I'm just going to put them on our little Google Slides, and we'll make sure to answer them either today or moving forward. Amanda, do you want to start?
I guess my only real big question going into this is like, is this right for me? Because I've kind of gone back and forth with it, because I do want like a healthy work-life balance. And what Tracy said kind of scared me, because it really hit the nail on the head with my biggest concern. I don't want to become a workaholic. I don't want to get sucked into never being able to put work aside. That being said, I do appreciate having control over a project, and I like being a part of all of it as opposed to just doing the pieces that somebody else tells me to do. So I just don't know if I can achieve that without the PhD. And if I can, what route do I take?
Yeah, well, so I'm tempted to answer that right now, but I
Right,
won't.
no, not the point, but that, and
Yeah,
it seems like a kind of specific question too. I'm not sure if that's going to really apply to everybody, but
It's a perfect question. I think it will apply to a lot of people. And I'll just say quickly, and we'll move to and get Dawn's question. We'll come back to yours, Amanda, later with everybody. But work-life balance is something that everybody in every field is challenged with, right? And it's all about how you approach it and how you make your own, your own choices. And so I'll just leave that there for now, that getting a PhD doesn't mean that you're going to work all of the time. I certainly don't. I work a lot, but it's kind of, I think it's basically, to me, it doesn't feel that different. Like I used to be a high school teacher, right? And I felt like my workload was just as big as it is now. And so I don't think necessarily getting a PhD means that you're not going to have good, healthy work-life balance. And I'll stop there because I want to just get questions right now. But Don, can you go ahead or Amanda, do you have others? Okay. Okay, thanks, Amanda. Don, you want to tell me what your question or questions are?
Yeah. Some of them I think just might be like nitpicky. Is the whole chapters thing just the different projects that you're doing? Is that just what chapters mean? Like, I have 5 chapters, I did 5 research projects. Like, just that, I think some of it is with the PhD, the whole process is the verbiage around everything, the jargon, I guess.
Yeah.
And then they talked about, staying on budget. Like, are there budgeting courses geared towards PhD students and research? Is that something where there's workshops you need to go for? And then as far as like qualifying exams, like that just seems really overwhelming and terrifying. And just like how you study for them, what does it encompass? How do you go about that?
This is great.
So far, my big ones.
Yeah, no, Don, these are all great. I, again, am really tempted to answer those right now. And I think I could assuage or allay some of your fear. I don't know what the right word is, but about those things. But I'm gonna just hold off, and we'll get to these either later today or in coming workshops, but we'll get to them, I promise, okay?
Cool.
Okay, thanks, Don. And then Blake, how about you?
I really don't have any immediate questions to ask right now. I'm really just learning about these as a first time. I'm sorry, I don't have anything.
Blake, it's nothing to be sorry about. It's great that you're here and you're absorbing it all. And my guess is as we move forward, and if you come to future workshops, you'll probably have questions. But if you don't, that's wonderful too. So it's wonderful that we generated these 4 questions. Why don't we go ahead and end the breakout room now and bring everybody back together? Does that sound good?
Yeah.
I just want to say real quick.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to meet your cute little baby.
How
is he doing?
God, he's doing great. Although today he's 4 months old today, and we took him for his 4-month well baby check. And he got his first set of vaccines, and so he was not too happy this morning, but then he just went to sleep. He's been totally asleep in the room next to me for the last 2 hours. Fingers crossed he'll feel okay, but he has the DPT and the pneumococcus and all these things that prevent serious illness. So today's a little bit of a rough day, but otherwise great. You're too kind, thank you, and I look forward to you meeting him and him meeting you. Okay, so I'm going to leave the room, then I'm going to bring everybody together. Okay, so I'll see you guys in the big group in just a second. I'm going to say, leave breakout room. Maya, can you hear me?
Hello.
Hi, wonderful. And it looks like Kyle's coming in too. Hi, Kyle.
Hey.
Great, this is perfect timing. So actually, I'm just bringing everybody back from their breakout rooms. Here they come. Yeah, so it's perfect timing. How are both of you?
Good. Well.
Great. So Kyle, are you still on Kauai? Are you back on Big Island or back in?
I'm back on Big Island. Yeah, I'm in Hilo.
Nice, wonderful. And then Maya, are you in Vancouver or where are you now?
I'm in Connecticut right now.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys both very much for joining us. I think we're still waiting on 1 room, maybe 2 rooms to come back here. So just real quick to bring you 2 up to speed. What we've done so far, I don't know if you guys saw, I should have thought about it before, but I shared the slides I was working on this morning with you. Basically, in the beginning, we just all introduced ourselves, what we're thinking about in terms of a PhD. And then Becky talked about, well, what is a PhD? What are you thinking about signing up for? And Tracy talked about, well, okay, so now you have a PhD, now what? And what's available to you in terms of career options, but also what does that mean in terms of responsibilities, et cetera. And what we just did is we went into breakout rooms and we just gathered everybody's questions on our Google Slides in 3 different breakout rooms. And at the end of the session here today, if there's any time, we're gonna see which ones of those are outstanding questions and try and answer them. If not, probably many of them we won't have time for, and we won't have answered here in the next hour, which you guys will be an integral part of. We're gonna shoot to answer in coming workshops. This workshop is intended to be just kind of broad overview of how do you apply for a PhD, with some details that we want to get into now and in a moment about the first steps. And so many of people's questions are probably about other pieces that are not, we're not intending to tackle today, but that we will tackle in coming weeks. So, but before we carry on, Maya and Kyle, would you guys be at all interested and open to just saying hi and introducing yourselves just very briefly, who you are and kind of what, you know, what your research is all about? Would that be okay?
Yep, sure. Yeah, so I'm Kyle Roy. I'm well, I just finished my first year of my PhD at Purdue University. And I also work for US Geological Survey and Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So I'm a pathways intern there, but so I'm a graduate of the TCBES program. I graduated in 2015 and I was working at USGS actually since then. And I study rapid Ohia death entomology. And so now I kind of switched into studying the chemical ecology of the disease. And so that's what my focus is for my PhD.
Wonderful, Kyle. And Kyle, thank you so much for being here. And what I asked Kyle if she would be open to doing is, we'll probably get to it here in 20 or 30 minutes, is talking a bit about her path in terms of developing, first finding a potential advisor, and then kind of, you know, developing the relationship with that advisor and ultimately getting into that lab, and then maybe a little bit of reflection on the first year of her PhD program. Kyle, does that sound okay to you?
Yeah, that sounds okay. I was like, wait, I finished my first year. But yeah.
Yeah. You did, and you should pat yourself on the back. I'm sure it has been easy in a lot of ways, right? And Maya, would you mind doing the same yourself?
Yes. Hi, my name is Maya Munsterman. I know most of you actually, but I graduated TCBES in 2019, so 2 years ago, and I worked at USGS. That's how I met Kyle actually, and we worked together for a little bit for 2 more years, and then I'm starting my PhD at Florida State University next week, and I'll be doing marine ecology, so a little bit different than what I did for my master's, but yeah, I'm super excited to share my path and any questions you might have.
Well, Maya, thank you, and wonderful to have you here as well. And Maya's also graciously offered to talk a little bit, and I'll show you some examples of email, kind of the first email to send to a, you know, in her case, a prospective advisor, and then also her CV that went along with that as an attachment to kind of give, you know, here's my background, here's who I am professionally as an academic. And we'll get to that in just a second, because those are really, you know, key first pieces. And in addition, of course, is identifying those people who you may be interested in reaching out to and starting this conversation. And so that's what I want to talk about now, is just, you know, kind of a little bit about that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Maya, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, and then we'll kind of come back as a group, and hopefully we'll have answered some of your questions that have been generated. And like I said before, many of them will answer in, you know, in future workshops if people are interested in us doing that. But I'm going to jump back over real quick to our slides, mostly just to kind of keep me on track. So you can probably see the questions from my group. We'll come back to these questions later. But here we are, finding a mentor for the application process. So before, you know, really launching into it, this is just my humble advice, is that you want one or more people who are willing to help you out with this process. And I think that is somebody who's gone through the process, and you know, somebody who you trust, and you know, will be willing to talk with them about, you know, what you're thinking about, and then maybe if they have time and they're open to it, having a look at your materials as you develop them. And that, like I say, could be one or more people. Those people oftentimes are faculty members, postdocs, as we were just talking about, obviously, you know, have gotten into PhD programs and been successful at completing them. And then folks like Maya and Kyle that are currently working on their PhDs. They've obviously just recently gone through this process and know it intimately well and are probably the best resources. So finding people who can be your mentors for the PhD application process. This is totally different than finding a mentor, a major professor who advises you during your PhD. I'm saying you want somebody who's going to help you with the process in developing your application materials. And in addition to kind of these three groups, there might be others as well, but I think you probably want at least somebody who's gone through the process. And how do you go about finding a mentor to help you with the process? One of the ways you can do that is, to look for faculty that seem like they would be open and willing to help mentor you. This slide that I borrowed from UC Davis, the Ecology and Evolution program, says within your school's biology department, I know some of you, maybe kind of biology adjacent, but in whatever department is appropriate, it may be, a faculty member that's at UH-Hilo, maybe a faculty member from where you did your undergraduate that you really got along well with, and you'd be comfortable asking them. There's kind of different ways, but it's probably somebody that you already have a relationship with, right? And say, hey, would you be interested in helping me out with this? It's obviously, something that somebody has to have time for. And so if somebody says, oh my gosh, I'd love to, but I'm, just swamped, then go on to the next person. One of the ways to reach out to faculty members is to find people who study the topics and the systems that you're most interested in, right? And so you guys are already deep into the literature, but as you keep reading the literature, one of the things that to me, this always, kind of resonates well for how to find the right people to work with is whose papers just rise to the top, right? Whose papers are the ones that like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've read in, weeks or months. And it really gets me excited. It's on topic. It's, oops, somebody's joining us here. Hold on a second. Oh, great. Lisa Canale is here. Wonderful. And so those people, whether they're in your department or another, they might be good people to kind of reach out to see if they'd be willing to help mentor you. And part of that mentorship maybe is just a little bit of mentoring at the beginning of who are good people to potentially be a major professor that I might want to apply to, right? So it might be that somebody who you don't know very well, who's at another university, has written this wonderful paper and it just, fireworks went off in your mind reading it. And they say, oh, sorry, I'm not taking students, but they may know a half a dozen other people, they probably do, that study very similar things and can be a kind of conduit. And so even on that level of mentorship of even a simple email exchange in the beginning can be really helpful. And then this is just saying, and then Tracy, you wanted to add to that? Yeah, Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the literature search is important, but I think the most important is talking to a faculty member or a postdoc who's in that field that you know well and trust, and ask for recommendations. Yeah. Because you want to make sure that the person that you're going to be working with for several more years is a good person, who's going to be supportive of you, who's going to treat you with respect, and who is going to be your cheerleader, your professional cheerleader for the rest of your professional career. Now, just for example, I had gone on interviews to Duke University, and it's really important to talk to other students or people who work in the labs. And so I was going around meeting students, and it became very clear that it wasn't the person I was looking to work with, but there was a person in their department that people were already warning me did not interact appropriately with female students. So you have to really do your homework. So you need to find out, like, is that person nice? How do they treat their students? Are they supportive of their students when they graduate? Can you get along with them at least 95% of the time, right? You want to make sure that's a good fit, and your advisor, you hope that they're also evaluating whether you're a good fit, because it's hopefully a productive lifelong relationship. So, not just who comes to the top of the list, but get recommendations, because you got to figure out if that's a good person.
Yeah, Tracy, I'm really glad that you jumped in there to say that, because it's probably the most important thing, right? You want to work with people who do wonderful science, but more importantly, you want to work with wonderful people, right? And part of that screening process happens in the beginning, right? As Tracy's saying, get advice up front so you don't waste time. But you can also continue, I'll just mention that you can continue, and we'll get to this in future workshop, that screening process, even if you've applied, right? And you're then, you know, as Tracy was talking about, you're talking to the grad students that are there in the department. You can make sure, well, you can try to make sure that you've done your homework before ultimately agreeing to go to you know, work with somebody. And that's what you want to do, is do your homework and make sure that they're not only a wonderful scientist, but they're a wonderful person, right? Yeah, Tracy, thank you very much for adding that. So this basically is, you know, find a good mentor, somebody who's gonna, you know, help you, or mentors, right? And there's no harm in having more than one. Now I want to kind of switch gears. I'll talk a little bit briefly about the overview, the big picture of the application process. And then I'll talk a little bit about the first components, but I really want to turn it over to Maya and have her talk about how she went through developing these materials, and she's sharing a couple of the pieces, as I mentioned, the kind of cold email as well as her CV. And then I'll turn it over to Kyle. We'll talk about, you know, kind of how she worked on developing that relationship with that person that ultimately became her major professor, her advisor for a PhD. But just in terms of overview, the big picture, right? Well, what is this? And it is a bit of work. It is, you know, you do have to have time, and you really are going to have to, you know, put in the hours if you want to apply for a PhD. And it's something, you know, that you want to think carefully. If you're trying to, you know, finish your master's thesis this fall semester, putting on, I'm going to apply for a PhD at the same time is going to make it a really, really busy time, right? It doesn't mean it can't be done, and people do it all the time, but just know that it's a non-trivial task to apply for a PhD. The pieces that go into it typically are a personal statement or a research statement, what we're going to cover later. Oftentimes a diversity statement, but not always, and we'll cover that later. The curriculum vitae, which is essentially, you know, your kind of academic resume, and we'll cover that today. Getting letters of recommendation, and it's typically 3 letters of recommendation, and we'll cover that later. GRE scores sometimes, fortunately many, I don't know if it's most yet, but many and maybe most PhD programs are going away from requiring the GRE, but some still certainly have it. And we'll come back to that in the timeline, because if you need to take the GRE, it's something that you want to start preparing for soon. And then your academic transcript, you're going to have your official academic transcripts sent from UH-Hilo to the universities that you're applying to. And then lastly here, what we've been talking about, the professors whose labs you're interested in joining. And this is something that's really essential in ecology, evolution, conservation biology, marine biology, etc. It's not necessarily the case in other PhD programs, even within biology. So for example, in cell molecular developmental biology, it doesn't always work this way. Oftentimes people will go their first year, they'll do rotations in labs and then ultimately settle on a lab. But this last piece is critically important, and that's what we really want to talk about, because you want to start working on that soon if you're thinking about applying for a PhD this year. Even if you're thinking about applying for a PhD next year, there's no harm in reaching out now. And one of the things that you'll find is, you know, there's an element of luck, like all things in life. And when, you know, a potential advisor has funding, has space, you know, et cetera, they're not on sabbatical, et cetera, all the things, right? And then you may reach out this year and they say, oh my gosh, I can't do it this year, but talk to me next year, that kind of thing, right? So that's, you know, what we want to kind of focus on for the remainder here. Before we do that, though, I'll just say that an admissions committee will review everybody's applications, and they'll do that all at the same time. And they'll oftentimes pre-COVID invite the top applicants then to come to campus for in-person interviews. I think in today's world, that's probably largely not true. And they are going to do it either, you know, this way, kind of video call way, or not do it at all. And in addition, that admissions committee is, you know, also really taking into consideration how excited a professor is in that program about you joining their lab, right? So the admissions committee is not going to accept you to the program unless there's a lab with a major professor who says, yes, I'm really excited about this student joining my lab, right? So it's those two pieces. You got to satisfy the admissions committee, but you also have to have somebody really wanting you to come into their lab. So you have to make these connections with potential faculty advisors before you submit your application. And that's just the one thing that's really kind of unique, I would say, about, you know, kind of ecology, evolution, conservation, biology, and allied fields. Okay, so this is basically more of the same, so I'll just, you know, kind of skip over it, but basically the programs admissions committee, right? They're evaluating you, as well as the potential advisors that you're applying to work in as your major professor are evaluating you. They're evaluating you in a little bit different ways, just that the admissions committee is more, are you a general good fit for this program? Whereas the advisor, the potential advisor, is evaluating you, are you a good fit for this lab to do this research and work with this particular lab group, right? So it's a little bit different.
Can I jump in here really quick?
Yeah, please, Maya, go ahead, of course.
So for this particular slide, I found that it's true like 95% of the time. The Ivy League schools like Yale and Stanford and Harvard and Princeton, they actually don't require you to have a potential advisor first. I mean, they obviously want you to have someone chosen, and you like put in your application who you want to work with. But I talked to a couple of professors. I didn't apply to any of those schools, but I talked to a couple of professors, and they said, first go through the admissions process. If you get accepted, then we'll talk. And so there are some schools that actually do it the flip way. But like you were saying, the majority of schools are, you look for your potential advisors first and then you apply. So there is that switcheroo that happens with some schools.
Yeah, Maya, that's great that you added that. And I can almost guarantee that what those professors are doing is protecting their time, right? And they're saying, why don't you see if the admissions committee says that everything is good, your application's complete, you know, everything works out well on their end, and then we'll have this conversation, rather than we spend time up front and the admissions committee says something, you know, that it didn't work out here. So I'm almost sure that that's what's happening there. But I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's just talk about timeline. So here we are already in August, and that's why I wanted to do this now. We probably should have started this earlier in the summer, but it's definitely not too late. If you're interested in applying this year, it's actually just fine. But you do this summer, you know, I would say in the next month or so, really want to work on identifying potential advisors if you're going to apply this cycle. And then if the schools that you're interested in, that those advisors are at, require the GRE, you want to sign up for it, study for it, and take it if your scores are out of date. And I think it's something like 5 years, right? Is that right? So if you've taken the GRE within the last 5 years, I think you're set, but don't quote me on that. Kyle, you're nodding yes though, right? Okay, okay. So hopefully if you have to take the GRE, you don't have to take it again because you've already taken it, but you may have to. Sometime soon, if you're getting serious and you think this cycle, I am going to apply for a PhD program, it's time to start asking people if they'd be willing to write you letters of recommendation. And like I said before, that's typically 3 people, and we're going to go over that in a later workshop. And now what I want to focus on is emailing these folks that you're interested in working with, right? How do you, reach out and kind of start that conversation? And I'm going to turn it over here to Maya in just a moment. But before I do that, I think some general advice that I think is good is to cast a wide net, right? There may be somebody in particular that oh, this is the person, they do exactly the kind of stuff that I'm most interested in. That's wonderful, and it'd be great if it works out, and it sometimes does, but it also puts all your eggs in one basket, right? And like I was saying before, they may not have funding for you in this next cycle, right? They may be running out, of money, et cetera. And so you want to probably cast a wide net. I would say that most people apply to maybe 5 to 10 different labs when they apply for a PhD. That's not always the case. And I'm an exception to that. When I applied for my PhD, I applied to only 2 schools and 2 labs. That's probably not a good way to go. I rejected from one and I got into the other, luckily, but with only 2 or, you know, a small handful, you're just not playing the odds very well, right? So I would say you probably, you know, want to start even broader, right? Because many of these kind of first emails are not going to pan out for one reason or another. And then ultimately you're going to be like, okay, there's, you know, about a half a dozen or so labs that I'm actually going to apply to. So you want to cast a wide net. And then on that note, if you reach out, you're not going to hear back from everybody for different reasons. It'd be wonderful if we lived in a world where everybody had, you know, time to respond to every email and, you know, do it in a thoughtful way. But that's not always the case for everybody. Don't take it personal at all. A lot of people will just say, oh, I'm in their mind, I'm not taking students, so I'm not responding. There's no judgment at all about you, and it just means that they're not taking students. And if they're not responding, then I would nudge them again. Myself, I've actually missed emails from prospective graduate students, and I've had them come back, you know, 3 or 4 weeks later and say, hey, I emailed you a while back and just curious, you know, if you had gotten it, and I had completely missed it, right? And I was really glad that they reached out again. So reaching out a second time is definitely a good idea. I would say if you don't hear back a second time, then it's probably, you know, time to, you know, look elsewhere.
I was just going to add, now being in the position of TCBS director, so there are some faculty members at UH-Hilo who don't respond, and I've gotten students email me saying, why isn't this professor emailing me back? And then I'm like, I don't know why. And so then I email the professor and say, hey, can you just at least tell them that you're not accepting students so they can stop emailing me? Like, because I guess some people, like, they are persistent, which is important, but like after 4 or 5 times, they're not getting the hint, and the faculty member isn't telling them that, hey, I'm not accepting students, and it, you know, they're going to the director of the program, which is not really necessary. So.
Well, you probably don't want that person as an advisor then. They're not.
Yeah, but I couldn't write that. I couldn't write that down.
Yeah.
Because I would not want that to get back to the person, but I was kind of thinking that to myself, so.
Yeah, I agree with you, Becky, fully that, you know, if you reach out, I would say 2 times and you don't hear back, it means that it's just not going to move forward, and it's time to move on. And there's lots of other, you know, great people out there, right? And so, yeah. Yeah, Tracy, thank you for mentioning that. It would be great if everybody kind of gave, you know, the time and the courtesy to let people know if they weren't taking students, but as we know, that's not always the case. Okay, so in terms of writing this email, you know, one of the things you want to do is you want to talk about your interests, right? Why are you interested in, you know, potentially applying to this lab? And you know, usually this is just a few sentences for things that, you know, that you've worked on and things that you're particularly interested in now. And then, you know, usually just a couple of sentences of why you might be a good fit for that lab. Why do you see yourself as being somebody who would be happy there? And then asking questions, right? You may, you know, you say, oh, I read your recent, you know, work, and I'm really curious about, you know, such and such, right? And asking some questions that open a conversation, right? An intellectual conversation, right? These people are intellectuals. They love it when people are passionate about the same things that they're passionate about. So if you can convey that in this email and kind of open a conversation, you know, you probably don't want to challenge them on some, you know, minute detail of their statistics, but open a conversation about the research. That would be wonderful. It looks like there's a chat here. Okay, thanks, Trevor. See you. And then you probably want to follow end the email by asking if they'd be willing to have a video conference and talk to kind of get to know you more as you move forward with this. So Maya, can I turn this over to you? This is an example email that you crafted and you sent to potential advisors, right?
Yeah, so I actually just was looking at my email, and overall I sent 36 inquiry emails, and that spanned from June until October. So it was over a course of time. But many people didn't respond to me. A couple of people said that they weren't accepting students. A couple of people said that we'll accept you, but only if you bring in your own funding. That was a big one. And then there are a handful of people that said, yeah, it looks like our research interests align and we should talk. And so it really narrowed down who was actually having students the next year. And yeah, 36 is kind of a lot, but I really only talked to about like 10, 12 people in total. But yeah, so this is my first email that I sent out. You don't want a cookie cutter one that you send to everyone, but you also don't want to write paragraphs and paragraphs because it'll take a lot of time on your end, and the person you're sending it to probably won't read paragraphs and paragraphs. But yeah, I just started out with a quick introduction. So hi, my name is Maya. I'm a recent grad from TCBES. My primary advisor was Dr. Matthew Knope, and for my thesis, I did this. If you didn't graduate, then you can just leave it at that. But because there's a time between when I graduated and when I'm applying, you should explain what you've been doing in the downtime. So I'm currently a USGS employee, and I did this. And then for my PhD, I hope to look at this. And so I kept it pretty broad, like one sentence. And I think for this sentence, I said, I hope to explore the anthropogenic effects on marine invertebrates in this type of habitat. And that's super broad, but sometimes you can like mesh what you are saying to what research that they are doing, and you can say, I'm also saw that you did this research in this place, and that matches what I want to do. And the fact that you read their publications or know where they have done research in the past kind of makes their ears perk up, I think, and be more interested in you. And then the next paragraph is, I've read your publications, I've read your lab website in detail. I feel like we align, and will you be accepting PhD students? And if you are, will you be willing to meet over Zoom to talk about those projects? And then, yeah, just see what they say. Matt said this a little bit earlier. If you don't get a response in a week, I just sent a follow-up. Sometimes I sent a follow-up after that, but yeah, if you didn't get a response after 2 weeks, you probably won't hear back from them. But yeah, this is kind of the general backbone of the emails that I sent out. And I would make sure to make each email unique to the professor you're sending it to, and make sure, you know, you can reference like a particular paper that they published, or a particular research project that they've done that you can talk about. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the structure I used.
Maya, this is wonderful, and thank you for being willing to share it. And also thank you for being willing to share that, you know, that you reached out to 36 different potential advisors, and that, you know, goes to my point earlier about cast a wide net, right? And that it sounds like you've moved forward with conversation with 10 or 12, but then ultimately, how many did you actually apply to?
I think I applied to 9.
To 9, okay.
Yeah, 8 or 9.
Yeah, so that's a lot of work, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Yeah. I think this is great, and obviously it was, you know, an effective, you know, email to get that handshake, that conversation going. Is there anything that you would do differently now, and, you know, in terms of, would you add anything else or expand on anything, or do you think that, what is your thought about it now? Is this how you would do it exactly again?
Yeah, I think no one was critiquing me on how my inquiry email was sent. I think everyone was fine with how I sent that off. But this is a little bit off topic, but there are people that I talked to for a good amount of time, but then ultimately they said, oh, I don't think that like we're the right fit, or I think that oh, sorry, I have another student that is a better fit, or I had those kind of interactions. But one piece of advice that I do want to share with all of you is that when you get rejections, it's actually a really great opportunity to ask why you were rejected. And so on many people that have rejected me, I asked them what was things that I could change in my application. And, a lot of times they say it's the funding, and that's not really on you, unless you get your own funding, of course. But I got really great advice on how to better prepare my personal statements. And one person suggested that I reorder my CV in a certain way. And those are things that didn't come to mind right away, but was really evident to these people that I was talking to. And so if there were things that they noticed that were the reason that they rejected you, then you should totally ask them, because it'll better your application the next time.
Wow, that's wonderful that you were, willing to ask, and that some of them were willing to give that feedback. Another thing that, just on that note, that you can do is, if somebody says, "Oh, thanks but no thanks," and for whatever reason, is you could also ask people, "Oh, do you know of other people in this field that might be good to reach out to, that have similar interests that you and I have," or something like that, and they may go, "Oh yeah, you should talk to so and so and so and so," right? One little thing that I think you did in your email is you attached your CV, right, as a PDF.
Yes,
and one thing that I might suggest, this is as a small suggestion, is to point that out in the email, right? Is to somewhere in this body of text, as you guys are crafting yours, to just say that I've attached my CV here if you'd like to learn more about my professional academic background, and then so they know that it's there, like and they don't have to just see it and open it.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. And another thing that a lot of professors do on their website, they say they have this whole section for prospective students. And if you want to email the person, make sure you really look at the prospective student tab on their website, because a lot of times they say, I'm not going to look at your email you send me unless you do these things that I require. And so, for example, one professor I looked at said that she wanted a CV, a paragraph on what your past research was, and then a paragraph on why you think that you'll be a good fit in my lab, and all in one email, and then with your CV attached. So make sure you really read that tab, because that will change how you craft your inquiry email.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And it's also probably some insight into what they're like as an advisor, right? So in terms of tips for writing this email, just as Maya did there, you want to keep this, they call it cold email, when you haven't met them before, to get the conversation started. Short, to the point, and professional, just like Maya did. All of those things: short, to the point, professional. A brief introduction, who you are, what you're doing, as she did, in terms of what her research topics have been for her master's thesis, what her job status was at the time, and about a paragraph in length, right? She did all of those things, and she attached her email. The only thing that I was suggesting is just to make sure to mention that it's there. And so a CV, I think you guys all know what a CV is, so I'm not going to spend too much time, and I want to turn it over to Kyle here, and I know we only have about 20 minutes left, so I'll just go quickly through this, but I think you guys know your CV is a comprehensive statement of your educational background, including your research and teaching experience and any broader impacts that you've done in terms of outreach, etc. It's a standard way to present your credentials in academia. And it's a quick and straightforward way. It's probably the most effective way for somebody to learn about you. So having that there is really important. I would just suggest that you convert your if you have it in Word or Pages or whatnot, convert it to a PDF when you have it all polished and perfect. And you probably even want somebody to look it over and make sure there's no errors, grammar, etc. Because the PDF looks much cleaner for the person who receives it, as well as all that stuff is just locked in. And so it's I think it's kind of safer to put your CV out there as a PDF. You can go look at this later, but some suggestions for formatting. We'll look at Maya's now, and you'll see that she's done a lot of those things in terms of formatting. The sections of a CV typically include your education and this obviously is necessary, right? This is an academic resume, basically. So you want to put your education almost invariably, and I would suggest you want it right up at the top under, your name and your, contact information, et cetera. And that's what this advice says, necessary section that always goes first. These other sections, you can reorder them, and you probably want to based on the kind of thing that you're applying for. A PhD application, the ordering may be different than if you're applying for, a job of one type versus a job of another type, et cetera. But those sections are usually research experience, publications and presentations, either together or separate, awards, honors, and grants, either together or separate, teaching experience, if you have some, any particular skills and certifications that are relevant to what it is that you're applying to, any outreach work that you've done, and any other related work experience. Typically, you want to start your CV probably after high school, but if there's something that you've done before that's particularly relevant, you want to put it on there. If there's things that you've done that you're really proud of, but they're not relevant, they're hard to take off. For example, I was an architectural draftsman for about a decade for my father, who was an architect here in Kauai, and I really wanted to keep that on my academic CV. It took me a while to pull it off, but because it's just not, not directly relevant, but that ultimately did. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on. Maya's CV is very impressive. It's very well developed. It's very clean. It's very organized. And she's done exactly those things that were suggested in the slide before, right? Right under her name and contact information, she has her education with the dates very nicely organized. She has her publications right up front, which I think is a great way to lead after education for a PhD application, right? This is you're applying to basically do a lot of research and produce, knowledge. Then putting your publications up front is great. Teaching experience next. All of her honors, scholarships, and grants. After that, invited seminars, conferences she's attended, oral presentations. I'm just going to go through this quickly. Is there anything in particular that you want to say? I want to kind of turn it over to Kyle for the sake of time. Is there anything in particular you wanted to say about this?
Nope. I think that there's a bunch of different ways you can format a CV. So this is just one way, but yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and it obviously was effective, right? And you got into a number of programs, and this is one way to do it. And there's not only one way to do it, but this is great. And so I just basically created screenshots of her 4.5 pages of her CV. And that's something that as you move through your academic career will probably grow and get longer. Some people like myself will do a brief version of their CV and keep it just the highlights version, usually 2 or 3 pages, and then have a longer version that can be, in some cases, senior faculty, 60 pages, right? And then recording kind of everything that you're doing along the way. So in terms of timeline, you want to sometime soon be starting these emails, right? August, September, October, hopefully some of those leading to some conversations, via Zoom or on the phone. Different people have different preferences about that kind of thing. And, it can be your preference and their preference kind of together. And having said that, I want to turn it over to Kyle now. In terms of, Kyle, would you be willing to kind of just talk us through your process and how you ultimately came to knowing about who's become your major professor, and then having this kind of relationship build, and then ultimately being there as a PhD student?
Yeah, sure. So when I was starting to think about doing my PhD, well, actually I was thinking about it for like 5 years basically, but I wanted to be sure and know that what I was going to work on was something that I wanted to dedicate another 5 years of my life to. Basically, I mean, you don't have to do it that way. A lot of people go in, not knowing what they want to work on, but I wanted to be sure that this is something that I am dedicated to, just because I'm a passionate person and I wanted to be passionate about what I was doing. And so I actually started emailing. So I'm totally on the different spectrum. I only emailed 2 professors. And so, because everybody's different, right? And I only emailed 2 professors, and that started in the summer before had applied. So I was actually exactly on the timeline that Matt shared. And so like June, July, I started emailing professors. I actually didn't hear back because, you know, professors are really busy in the summer, actually. And there's my dogs. Sorry. Professors are usually really busy in the summer. And so they'll be at conferences and whatnot. And so like you really can't take that personally. I definitely like did take it personally, and I see other people do it too. And it's really not you. It's just like, it's an email. Somebody's so busy that they just didn't see it. So like, don't feel discouraged and email them again. And actually what happened with me was the guy who's actually my advisor now, he didn't even respond to my email until like the second time. And after I had called his coworker and told him that he wasn't responding to my emails. And he like literally just like had a draft email that he never sent to me, you know, so you never know what's going on. So that's totally something that happens. And then, so I actually I applied to actually only one school. I was thinking about applying to 2 schools. Everyone advised me to not only apply to one school. So yeah, you should probably not apply to only one school, because by only applying to one school, I knew if I didn't get in, then I wasn't gonna go do my PhD. And that's just, you know, that was just the terms that I came to. And let's see. So, you know, you also have to start asking for letters of recommendation, like about the same time that you're, you know, already looking at advisors. And you know, if you don't ask early, you're going to get a recommendation that's like just as poorly prepared as you were. So, and also don't feel like you're nagging or something if you're wondering why your letter of recommendation hasn't been sent in yet either. So keep on asking for that too. Let's see. And chatting with potential advisors too. So the first time I talked to my advisor, I was so nervous and I had like no idea how it was going to go, and so I had like read all his papers and I was totally ready to talk about like everything that he knew, but he only wanted to talk to me about my stuff. Like he was just really curious about like what I was working on, you know. And it was like, you have to remember that these people that you're emailing are humans, and so they're not like, and I mean, even if they are out to get you, then you don't want to work for them either. So you know how I mentioned that I had emailed 2 different people, I had actually heard from somebody else that this other person that I wanted to talk to, you know, actually was discriminatory towards women. And so I was like, I don't know if I should actually email this person. And I did anyways. And when he didn't respond, I was just like, well, I guess that's just like something that I have to take. And because it's a real thing, but you have to think about like, but you don't want to, even if this person is like the top researcher in your field, you don't want to work for them because it's real, like that kind of thing is going to happen to you. And let's see, what else did I want to tell you guys about? So what I did was I emailed, I also started looking into funding about the same time that I was looking into school, because I was like, I'm not going to go to school unless I have funding. And so a lot of times, you know, professors will have funding themselves, or they'll tell you can do a TA-ship or whatnot. But it, like with a PhD, it's like a huge commitment. So you're going to need a lot of funding for a long time. And even having funding like allows you to, you know, like work on what you want to do, and even have like this, you know, security and like maintain your mental health while you're doing your research too. Because you're like, oh, well, my grant's running out at the end of the year. I don't know if I'm going to like keep doing my PhD. That's real things that really happens. And so like really looking into the funding, like I actually emailed people that ran the fellowship, that one of the fellowships that I have, and just told them that I was interested. And they had actually told me about a graduate school visitation program, which I wouldn't have heard of before. And so you guys should look out for that too, because usually in the fall, there will be a whole bunch of graduate visitation programs, and it'll be like totally paid for, and you just have to apply for it, but you have to know about it. And so that was something that I wasn't aware of. And when I was at the graduation visitation program, I was also told that if I applied early, like a month early before the applications were actually due, I would have a better chance of getting fellowships, which is another thing that I had never heard of before. And so I don't know if all schools are like that, but at least Purdue was like that. And so I had like an early application deadline. Let me see if I have anything else that I wanted to tell you guys. Couple things that I did want to tell you guys. So when I was applying for my PhD, I had to accept and be ready to move wherever I find a job after I finish my PhD, because that's the reality of it. Like I'm from Hawaii, I want to stay in Hawaii, but I knew going into it that I might not be able to stay here forever, you know? And that's just the reality of having a PhD. And if you want to stay in academia too, there's probably even less of a chance of actually staying in Hawaii. And that was like terms that I had to come with. And yeah, just really trying to figure out what you want to dedicate the next 5 years of your life to. And I'm like a list person, so I also like made a list of all the classes that I wanted to take. And so when I was looking at programs too, I was, making sure that they had all these classes that I also wanted to take too. So that's pretty much all I have, unless anyone else has questions.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so can I ask, are you happy? Is it working out?
Oh yeah. You wanted me to reflect on my past year.
Yeah, if you're up for it.
Yeah. So it's funny because, I already did my master's and you guys are already doing your master's too. It's almost the same, but like longer in my reflection of it. And I really, really wanted to have an advisor that like wanted to be, would be my friend for life kind of thing. And a lot of people have that relationship, but some people don't. And so I wanted to find somebody that, I really meshed well with, and I could see us like working on projects together after I graduate. And that's like something really important to find too. To me, like it was more important for me to have a good advisor than to go to a good school. Yes, because like the mentorship is so important, and like knowing like a lot of being a PhD is publishing papers. And if you don't have somebody to help you publish your first author paper, you will struggle. And yeah, I struggled basically. I didn't have like just kidding. But yeah, and basically like committing to knowing that like certain things that like we didn't really like when I did my master's, like things we didn't talk about, which people talk about more nowadays is like anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome. They're all real things, and they're pretty relevant in graduate school. And imagine like going into that like on top of COVID. And so it was just like a really weird world to navigate and go back into after being like, out of academia. But I mean, just make sure that you have a good mentor, and you build relationships, and all the people that you go to school with in your lab, they will be in your circle probably for the rest of your life. I mean, a lot of the people that I did my master's with, we all still work together all the time. We see each other like every weekend. And so when I went into my PhD, I, made sure that I built relationships with my lab members, and even like, other people within my program. If there was opportunities, to hang out, just to, I don't know, go get a beer or something, I always did it, just to make sure I built those relationships, because you never know, like you might just want to, I don't know, you might just end up like needing some sort of skill on a project that you're working on. Then you just happen to know this person, because you put in the time and effort to make friends with them. So.
Kyle, all of that rings totally true in all of my experience. And I definitely second all of that, especially thinking of it, as a two-way street, finding the situation that's right for you, that you're going to feel supported. And I think, to all of us, if you, are willing to do a PhD during this pandemic and move across the country and face all of the things that the challenges that those create, you're going to want somebody in your corner who's really supportive. And it sounds like you found that person. And you may not be best friends with that person forever. I'd say probably most people are not that way with their PhD advisor. I actually get along wonderfully with my PhD advisor. We don't work together anymore, but we get along great, and we're lifelong friends without question. My postdoctoral advisor, we work together almost every day. So that you do want to try and find, those people that are, ultimately going to be your champions, your supporters, and people that you, potentially will get the support that you need, not only, to Kyle, to your point, not only while you're there, but hopefully potentially beyond as well. In the last handful of minutes here, Becky, you've put into the chat some really wonderful advice. Do you want to just speak about those things as we wrap up here?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's important. It's important to just spend enough time knowing yourself and what's going to work for you. And hopefully through your master's, you figured that out. You might need a lot of freedom. And so you don't want a hands-on advisor, and that might work for a student in the lab working with that advisor, and they just have a wonderful relationship because that student needs that structure, and maybe you're a rebel and you want that freedom. And you just need to figure out, like, that person's not going to work for you, even though everybody loves him or her. Maybe it's just not what's going to be good for you. So it's really partially knowing yourself. Talk to the other students, find out how it's going with them, but also take that with a grain of salt to realize like how you're going to work. Find out more about that person's working style, how it works. If you can visit, Kyle mentioned there are opportunities. Some schools will have programs for you to visit. I know it's a lot harder being in Hawaii. I met my PhD advisor because I was working, after undergrad, I worked at a field station for more than a year. And there was like a weekend retreat, and my advisor couldn't go, my supervisor couldn't go, so he sent me. And at that weekend retreat, I met a whole bunch of people from University of Florida, and that's my future advisor was there, a whole bunch of students. And when I met the students, they were like, come visit, drive up, you can stay on my couch, so I already had like a group of people that were already super great and took care of me the whole weekend. Then I went to visit, and most students are totally willing to do that stuff. And then keep bugging people. It is like important though, like Kyle went, like you've chosen Purdue because you have a very specific advisor and you have a specific topic that you're, that's working on that's pretty specialized, but you have to form a committee. And so you have to make sure like there's more than just one person at the school, like that you can envision. You need to envision enough people that are going to form your committee and be your support network. And they may not be in your field, but maybe you need a statistician, and maybe you need a spatial data person, or you make sure there's enough expertise there and there's like a dynamic enough environment that you're going to feel stimulated and get the kind of support you need. Especially after coming out from here where we've got, limit, Hawaii is just more limited, and if you do go to the mainland, you will have a lot more opportunities. So take advantage of that.
Yeah, Becky, that's all just absolutely wonderful advice, and I couldn't agree with all of it more. And yeah, one thing, right, is thinking about your university in terms of their kind of intellectual resources, not just the physical resources. It may be that you want to go somewhere because it's the best place because of its proximity to your field site or whatnot. But to Becky's last point there, that's a really important one that I wasn't thinking about. Which is that you want the kind of depth, right? And small schools, you can be a big fish in a small pond, but sometimes you'll find that there's not too many people that are thinking about the things that you're thinking about and can give you the support that you need. And that's another important thing to think about, right?
Another factor is, can I live in this place? Can I afford it?
Yeah.
I did my PhD at University of Florida and I did my postdoc at Berkeley. I felt much poorer as a postdoc, even though I made like 3 times the amount of money than my PhD teaching assistantship, just because the cost of living was so high and housing and everything. Living in Florida wasn't necessarily like where I thought I would live necessarily, but it was great. College towns are a lot different than sometimes the rest of the state. So, those kinds of things you find out by talking to people and visiting if you can. But generally, if you're in a PhD program, you will be around people with similar backgrounds, even if where the other places you're living are not. But then you also have to think if that's right for you.
All right, well, we've thrown a lot at you, and it's just about 3 o'clock. So I don't think it would probably be meaningful in the last 2 minutes here to try and tackle your specific questions, but we have them. So I guess maybe the one last question is, are you guys at all interested in continuing? Do you want to do more of these workshops to get into the kind of nitty gritty about the other pieces as you would move forward towards an application? Or is this enough and this was a waste of time? You can be honest, be brutally honest.
I absolutely do not think it was a waste of time, but I am not currently in a position where I know I'm going to be applying for school in the next year, maybe even in the next 2 years. So I probably won't come to more workshops until I'm more prepared to actually dive into it.
Yeah.
Just I wanted to get everyone's ideas, like whether or not this was kind of right for me. And I think that listening to everyone's perspectives was really helpful. So it was helpful for me, but I probably won't do more workshops.
Okay, Amanda, that's great, and I think that's really good thinking, and also a smart way to protect your time. And you will probably, hopefully, do them in future years. So look out for that, next summer or beyond. If you're thinking about applying later and you want to join us, then that'd be great. But Amanda, it's wonderful to see you. What about the rest of you? Is this helpful?
I am a planner, so I like to pack 2 weeks in advance. So this is perfect for me. So yeah, I would like to continue to go to these.
Okay, great. Did you say you like to pack 2 weeks in advance?
Oh yeah, I'm a crazy person.
I love it. I love it. Even if it's not a trip that you're excited about, just any trip?
Pretty much, yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I'm 1 week in advance. So
one week. Wow.
1 to 2, depending on my schedule.
Yeah. I'm like 20 minutes. You do, yeah. Okay. What Rose, Nicole, Blake, should we do some more or is this enough? Do some more?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the meeting here today, just listening to your guys' advice, and then also Maya and Kyle's. I really appreciated their how fresh they are in that process. I still am finishing my master's degree, so but I would keep coming to more if they were offered, just because if there's anything I'm finding out in my master's, it's like you can never start to prepare too soon. So I think I'd come to more.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, Rose, that's a really good point. You don't have to apply this cycle hopefully for the workshop to be meaningful, right? Just I think building your understanding of what's entailed will be helpful whenever you decide it's right? Okay, so Nicole, you say yeah? And Blake, do you think it'd be a good idea?
Yeah, I would support having more
meetings like this.
Okay.
Yes, I would.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's do it. And Maya, Kyle, Becky, thank you guys very much. Really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time and expertise. We'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, or late evening if you're in Connecticut, right? Okay, in terms of scheduling, I'll just send out an email for the next one. Maybe I'll get together Becky and Tracy and we'll talk about schedule. But I would guess that maybe in 2 weeks or so, we'll do the second one and we'll just kind of talk about the next pieces. And I'll share this recording with you guys as well as there's 4 other students who wanted to be here, like, as I mentioned at the beginning, who couldn't. And the slides with you guys if you'd like to refer back to them. And we'll just kind of keep building materials. And I think what we'll do is we'll build like a La Lima site that has all of the materials as well as lots of websites and other things that we don't have time to go through but are really helpful for crafting certain pieces. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yeah, also I wanted to say, if any of you guys want to meet one-on-one, I'm more than happy to meet with you guys. I am far away, so it would be over Zoom, but yeah, just let me know. I'm more than happy to share any of my materials or my essays or my fellowship stuff. Yeah, just let me know if you're interested.
Wow, that's really generous, Maya. Thank you for offering that.
Yeah.
And good luck in your program. It's going to be good.
Yeah, indeed.
Kyle, you made it through the first year. Yay.
Yes.
The first year has to be the hardest without question, because there's so much change, moving, getting used to everything, expectation, all of it, getting your project off the ground. You make it through the first year, the rest of them are going to be easy.
Right.
Well, easier. Easier. All right, everybody. Thank you. I really appreciate it. We'll be in touch via email.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.